Good morning, friends. I am Dr. Captain D.K. Ramawat, non-invasive cardiologist, and I am working as a consultant, non-invasive cardiologist at Ramawat Heart and General Medicine Hospital, Barmer, Rajasthan. Last time, we have discussed the management of femoral artery intervention and the complication of femoral artery intervention. But this time, we are going to discuss the complication of transradial interventions and how to manage it. So, transradial access lowers the risk of access site complications compared to transfemoral access. Higher density of, why? I am giving the answer. Higher density of sympathetic receptor expression and smaller lumen with a bulkier wall and the dual arterial circulation in the forearm are likely responsible for some of these unique complications associated with radial access. Over the past 2 decades, due to better understanding of the occurrence of these complications, several highly effective and low-risk treatment strategies have evolved. In this lecture, we describe the complications and their prevalence, followed by strategies for prevention and treatment. So, let us move for complications of transradial intervention, how to manage. So, friends, we are taking complications of transradial interventions and how to manage it. Welcome, friends. So, first we take the introduction. In comparison to transfemoral access, transradial access has shown significantly decreased incidence of access site-related complications. Second, increased patient comfort also occurs. And also, there is reduced procedural cost. And also, there is improved measure success of project. In this lecture, we will discuss the prevalence, causes, prevention, and treatment of these complications. Now, you see here, following complications occurs in transradial access. So, first is the radial artery spasm, very common. Then second is radial artery perforation and hematomas. Third, hardware entrapment. Fourth, catheter kinking. Fifth, radial artery pseudoaneurysm. And sixth, radial artery occlusion. Seventh, radial arteritis. And last but not least, eighth, non-inclusive radial artery injury, that is failure to include. Now if we take first radial artery spasm. It is the most common functional complication of transradial access. There is high density of alpha receptors. What are the alpha receptors? Alpha receptors mediate action of catecholamine like epinephrine and norepinephrine in the muscular radial artery wall. Second, tactile stimulation like touch, pressure, vibration, temperature and pain. They occur due to hardware transit. Then third is tactile stimulation due to hyperadrenergic state generated in an anxious patient, usually leads to radial artery spasm. So first we take, now this spasm we are taking 2 parts. First is puncture related spasm before obtaining transradial access. Here radial artery puncture is due to small caliber of artery as well as significantly higher wall thickness to lumen diameter ratio. Therefore, successful advancement of guide wire is at times difficult. Then the severe spasm of distal radial artery because of multiple failed puncture is frequently observed during the operator's initial learning curve. After puncturing the anterior wall and entering the lumen, stabilization of the cannula is difficult and frequently due to antegrade flow of blood, a cannula is pushed back out of the lumen, hence wire advancement is at times difficult. So, development of radial artery spasm leads to a resultant loss of puncture site sensation, making further attempt more difficult. Here you can see a flow chart. And before I go to flow chart, I would like to tell you prevention of puncture-related spasm before obtaining transradial access. Some centers use ultrasonography to maximize first attempt success in cannulation. Second, the counter-puncture technique, that is reduced risk of dislodgement by the way of transfixation of radial artery, has proven to be simple and reliable for first attempt successful cannulation. And treatment is treatment of puncture-related spasm before obtaining transradial access. Here, local subcutaneous injection of 200 microgram nitroglycerin in the vicinity of the failed attempted puncture provide rapid dissolution of radial artery spasm. Now we see the flow chart. Algorithm for management of radial artery spasm. Here you see, if there is spasm, give spasmolytics. For example, nitroglycerin, diltiazem, nicorandil, and verapamil. If you are able to navigate catheter, then you proceed with the procedure. And if you are not able to navigate catheter, then repeat spasmolytics. Still, if your navigation fails, then you give local infiltration of spasmolytics at the site of spasm. Still navigation fails, then give mild sedation like diazepam. If still this navigation fails, then you go for BAT and PAT technique, that is balloon assisted tracking and pigtail assisted tracking. And still navigation fails, then access site switched over, it should be changed. Here you can see the two figures. First is an example of diffuse radial artery spasm. You can see the arrow. You can see the arrow. Spasm which was relieved after intraarterial injection of 5 mg diltiazem. It is relieved here. You can see. And in second there is focal radial artery spasm. Here you can see focal radial artery spasm, which was relieved after intraarterial injection of 200 microgram nitroglycerin, and it is, you can see, relieved. Now we have come to radial artery spasm after obtaining transradial access. Significant spasm is noted in younger patients, more in women compared to men, and in those patients who are anxious. Treatment with additional intraarterial vasodilator is successful in relieving spasm. Long segment of spasm require dedicated treatment and lead to prolongation of procedure duration. Now we are going to deal prevention of radial artery spasm after obtaining transradial access. Here what to do? A calm and quiet catheterization laboratory environment required with a confident team, including the operator as well as associated professionals. Second, administration of anxiolytic and sedation before the procedure in a few vulnerable patients. Third, use of hydrophilic introducer sheaths. They reduce friction during catheter insertion, providing smoother and more comfortable access to the vascular system. Lastly, limiting the number of catheters and guide wire exchange. Now you can go to treatment of radial artery span after obtaining transradial access, after obtaining it. So here what to do, administration of intra-arterial vasodilators, either 200 mg nitroglycerin or 5 mg diltiazem, or intra-arterial verapamil and nicardipine given. Then secondly, administration of additional sedation in a very anxious patient like diazepam. If spasm is not improving despite above intervention, an adverse anatomic substrate should be suspected, leading to impediment in hardware transit through the radial artery. Here you can see radial artery perforation and hematomas. We are switching to the second major point. And you can see the figure, example of radial artery perforation. Blood is leaking out. So here, radial artery perforation, a rare complication, less than 1%, during transradial access. It can lead to forearm hematoma and potentially compartment syndrome. Conservative management, including heparin reversal, ice compression pack, and potentially balloon angioplasty or covered stent may be necessary to seal the perforation and manage the hematoma. More details are as follows. When there is perforation, radial artery perforation occurs when the arterial wall is punctured, leading to blood extravasation. This can happen during the initial puncture or wire manipulation or catheter advancement. Then hematoma formation. Perforation often results in a hematoma, that is a collection of blood outside the artery. In radial access, this commonly presents as a forearm hematoma, but it can also occur more proximally in the arm also. Then there is compartment syndrome also. So here, if the hematoma becomes large or does not dissolve, it can lead to a compartment syndrome. That is a serious condition where increased pressure within a muscle compartment restricts blood flow and can damage tissues. Here you can see management of radial artery perforation and hematomas. Here I can show you figure, example of forearm hematoma. You can see forearm hematoma. And use of sphygmomanometer cuff to disperse the forearm hematoma. Here, we are using sphygmomanometer cuff. Initial control, immediate control of bleeding through ice compression is crucial, extremely important. Second, conservative management. This may involve heparin utilization, crossing the perforation with a wire and placing a long sheath or guide catheter across the perforation to help to seal it. Then thirdly, balloon angioplasty or covered stent with fabric or graft material covering a metal stent framework used. In some cases, more invasive measures like balloon angioplasty or covered stent may be necessary to seal the perforation. Here you can see the figure of covered stent. Now the thrombus aspiration. It is also, we are learning in the management, thrombus aspiration. In rare instances, thrombus aspiration may be used to manage a heavy thrombus burden associated with the perforation. Then E point, compartment syndrome management. If compartment syndrome develops, immediate surgical consultation and potential fasciotomy, surgically, that is release of the fascia, may be necessary. Now the forearm hematoma is addressed by encircling the sphygmomanometer cuff and inflating it as the systolic pressure 5 to 10 mm of mercury higher as compared to patient's systolic blood pressure for few minutes, followed by deflation of subsequently several such repetitions. In most cases, hematoma disperses, leading to elimination of compression effect in the affected area. Here you can see razor effect in radial artery perforation and hematomas. The razor effect is a transradial access, refers to a phenomenon where the sharp edge of guide catheter tip can act like a razor blade, potentially causing damage to the radial artery, especially in cases of tortuous or anomalous artery. This effect can lead to difficulty navigating the catheter and perforation of the artery and even hematoma formation. You can see the schematic representation in the figure. Balloon where there is no kink and simple way it is going. Consequently, the razor effect can lead to radial artery perforation, radial artery dissection and difficult catheter navigation. Prevention and management of razor effect. Pigtail assisted tracking, balloon assisted tracking and catheter in guide technique using a diagnostic catheter as a dilator within the guide catheter to improve stability and minimize complications. Use of hydrophilic coated catheters and careful wire selection and intraarterial vasodilators. Now, something more. Use of combo technique in radial artery perforation and hematoma. A technique that facilitates the passage of larger guide catheters through the radial artery, therefore potentially minimizing complications and facilitating more complex procedures. The technique is used to address challenges posed by the relatively small size of radial artery when working with large devices. You can see the figure. Here, in vitro demonstration of combo technique, extra backup catheter and multipurpose guide catheters are there. So here points to remember is, first is transradial access. Here transradial access is a common approach for catheterization procedure, offering advantages like reduced bleeding complications compared to transfemoral access. Secondly, challenges with large catheters. Transradial access is generally safe. Negotiating larger 7F guide catheter through the radial artery can be challenging, especially in cases with relatively small arteries, lumen. Now here, sometimes brachial artery perforation also can occur. Not only radial artery, but brachial artery perforation can occur. Brachial artery rupture is a rare but serious condition where the brachial artery, a major blood vessel in the upper arm, tears or ruptures. It's often caused by blunt or penetrating trauma and can lead to severe bleeding and potential limb-threatening complications. Perforation of subclavian and innominate structures can also cause by hydrophilic guide wires due to inadvertent forceful entry and needs to be treated at times with covered stent placement, as these sites are frequently uncompressible. Now you can see the causes and risk factors and brachial artery perforations. Causes and risk factors of brachial artery perforations. First cause is trauma, blunt injury. And second, iatrogenic injury, means arterial puncture or catheterization. Second, aneurysm. Aneurysm bulging in the arterial wall can rupture, causing severe bleeding. Then treatment of brachial artery perforation is emergency surgery, control of bleeding and monitoring for complications. And also here you can see the use of sphygmomanometer cuff to disperse the forearm hematoma. Now third point, major point, hardware entrapment. So long areas of spasm are usually present when entrapment happens. Entrapment should be suspected during attempted withdrawal of a catheter or an introducer where the patient experiences pain and a linear indentation and notch is observed on the skin overlying the path taken by superficial artery. Now its prevention of hardware entrapment is what? First, minimizing of tactile stimulation They are touch, pressure, vibration, temperature and pain of the arterial wall by limiting the number of catheter exchanges, avoiding forceful hardware movement, and paying careful attention to the catheter to artery ratio, which lowers the incidence of catheter entrapment. Then fourth, using hydrophilic equipment, especially introducers, is also essential in preventing entrapment. And fifth, shorter procedure duration should also help in decreasing the likelihood of entrapment. Now we go to treatment of hardware entrapment. In fact, radial artery spasm is the likely culprit mechanism. All measures known to reduce radial spasms are effective in relieving entrapment, and these include the following. Number one, administration of one or more doses of intra-arterial vasodilators, for example, nitroglycerin 200 mg or diltiazem 5 mg IV. Second, in this technique, a smygomanometer cuff is applied to the proximal upper arm with an intent to occlude flow in the axillary and brachial artery by inflating the cuff to pressure exceeding the systolic blood pressure. The cuff is felt inflamed at this pressure for approximately 5 minutes, leading to mild ischemia of distal extremity. Upon relieving the pressure from the cuff and re-establishing antegrade flow in the arterial circuit, a profound waves of vasodilatation in the distal arterial circulation is observed with frequent release of the entrapped hardware. This technique has several benefits, including its high success rate as well as total lack of systemic adverse effect. In the failure of above event, administration of deep sedation using propofol, a short-acting general anesthesia used, or administration of general anesthesia may be necessary to relieve entrapment. Application of excessive force in relieving entrapment could lead to a serious complication of total tearing of the arterial wall, which has very serious consequences. So this is fourth major point, the catheter kinking. Catheter kinking, a common complication during radial artery access procedure, and it can occur in either radial or brachial or subclavian or axillary arteries. It is often caused by excessive catheter torque or means rotation, and especially in tortuous anatomy, simple maneuver like gently rotating the catheter in the opposite direction may resolve minor kinks, but more severe kinks or entrapment may require techniques like using a snare catheter, a balloon-assisted trapping, even cutting the catheter hub or sheath exchange means intravascular instrument to enter blood vessel smoothly. Now, what are the causes of catheter kinking? First is excessive torque. Aggressive catheter manipulation can lead to kinking. Second, artery spasm. Third is entrapment, means being trapped. Now the signs and symptoms of catheter kinking: sudden loss of aortic pressure tracing, indicating a blockage, patient discomfort and increased procedure time. Now prevention of catheter kinking: careful catheter handling, recognizing and treating spasm, and choosing appropriate catheters. Then what is the treatment? Treatment of catheter kinking is, if the catheter is in superficial location, there is upper arm and forearm external compression of proximal segment of catheter used. Using manual pressure or application of smygomanometer cuff inflated to suprasystemic pressure may lead to immobilization of the proximal segment of catheter, after which, if opposite torque is applied, the kink could be undone and the catheter successfully removed without further arterial trauma. Second point of treatment, using a snare catheter technique Once the proximal portion of catheter is anchored by snare and immobilized, opposite torque is applied once again to undo the kink, after which proximal portion of catheter is released from the snare and catheter is successfully removed from the artery. Here you can see the figure. Use a sphygmometer cup which to remove the catheter kink. Here this is the kink. It is losing and it has disappeared kink by sphygmomanometer only. Now, fifth major point, radial artery pseudoaneurysm. It occurs in 0.03% patient with diseased radial artery, such as in elderly patient with high atherosclerotic burden, or in CKD patients while setting of continued long-term systemic anticoagulation therapy. Then they usually occur a few days after the procedure with the usual presentation of a painless or tender pulsatile swelling at the puncture site with a palpable thrill and audible bruit. Ecchymosis to a varying degree are noted surrounding the pseudoaneurysm. In view of the risk of splitting and subsequent massive bleeding, they need to be treated. Now, prevention of radial artery pseudoaneurysm. Documentation of flow in the pseudoaneurysm sac with a rent in the radial artery wall is essential for the diagnosis of pseudoaneurysm. Carefully examine with palpation for thrill, auscultation to assess for the presence of bruit, and perform ultrasonography to evaluate the swelling. Now, the treatment of radial artery pseudoaneurysm. First, application of extrinsic pressure using a hemostatic compression device with an intent to interrupt flow from the radial artery into pseudoaneurysm sac is frequently effective in thrombosing the pseudoaneurysm. Second, larger pseudoaneurysm not responding to compression either manually or using a band with or without ultrasound guidance may need ultrasound guided thrombin injection. That is, 50 microgram of thrombin is injected as 1 ml solution in the aneurysm sac while compressing the neck of aneurysm. Third, the pseudoaneurysm with a wide neck may pose a particular challenge with failure of the above mentioned treatment. The fourth, surgical excision of pseudoaneurysm with subsequent repair of the tear of the radial artery is highly effective and could be usually performed under local anesthesia. Now, sixth major point, radial artery occlusion. It occurs in 2 to 10% of patients undergoing transradial access. So, radial artery occlusion is likely caused by intimal injury due to the hardware at the puncture site and beyond. Hemostatic compression leading to thrombus formation and subsequent rapid organization with obliteration to the lumen. Due to extrinsic macro as well as micro collateralization in the forearm, acute ischemia due to radial artery occlusion is usually not observed. Now, prevention of radial artery occlusion. The first point, caliber of the hardware should be preferably smaller than the lumen diameter of radial artery. Second, use of intraprocedural parenteral anticoagulation administration at adequate dosage is essential in preventing radial artery occlusion. Second, excellent efficacy of unfractionated heparin and anticoagulants such as enoxaparin and bilirubin also show to be benefit. And currently, 5,000 or 50 units per kg of unfractionated heparin in patient at the extreme of weight administered as bolus either intraarterially or intravenously during the process used. Third point, patient hematostasis. Patient hemostasis is highly effective in significantly lowering incidence of radial artery occlusion without any adverse effect. Fourth point, excessive long compression duration should be avoided. very short duration of compression may be associated with rebound bleeding, which is stronger predictor of radial artery occlusion and should be avoided. Fifth and last point, compression of a ipsilateral ulnar artery has been shown to increase the radial artery velocity time integral by nearly 40%. The flow increase in associated with a lower probability of thrombosis. This increase in radial artery flow could be recruited for further prevention of radial artery occlusion. Now, what is the treatment of radial artery occlusion? First point, patient complain pain caused by inflammation as a result of instrumental or presence of thrombus. So here, cold or hot compresses should be given. Short course of anti-inflammatory agent give relief. Then local exercise are frequently effective in relieving the non-specific symptoms. Then recanalization of radial artery should not be performed. Recanalization of radial artery should not be performed as a default strategy. Instrumentation is associated with risk of distal embolization. Then the D, ipsilateral ulnar compression, could be applied to improve the probability of recanalization of radial artery occlusion before discharge. Then fifth, systemic anticoagulation therapy could be used in patients who develop radial artery occlusion to promote recanalization. Be careful for major bleeding in mind in such treatments. Now, this is the actually last slide. Here, two major points are there. One is radial arteritis, 7th point. Pain and tenderness along the course of radial artery reported by minority of the patients after transradial access. This is presumed to be from the local inflammation of radial artery architecture due to instrumentation. It frequently responds to cold or warm compresses and anti-inflammatory therapy, including non-steroidal agent or a short course of corticosteroids. In most instances, it is self-limiting and does not require dedicated treatment. Eighth major point, non-inclusive radial artery injury, that is failure to include. Radial artery intimal thickening, number 1, hypertrophy of media, number 2, increased fibrous burden have been reported, third, then partial transection leading to pseudoaneurysm and bleeding, then fifth is dissection, and sixth thrombosis, seventh stenosis. Now, the last but not the least, conclusion. Several transradial access site-related complications occur in clinical practice. Understanding the mechanism of these complications may aid in devising prevention and treatment strategies to prevent adverse outcome. Thank you, friends. Thank you very much.